episode of Outside the Panel with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Outside the Panels. I am your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes, and joining me all the way from a coffee shop, potentially near you, we have the Unstoppable Wasp creator, Jeremy Whitley. Jeremy, how's it going? Or Whitley, I should say.
Yeah, Whitley. Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, I'm great. My mutant ability is to say people's names wrong. So, well done. You've hit that
first one.
I wouldn't care. I was looking at it as I was reading it. I was like, yeah, I've said that wrong. Okay, never mind. All right, Jeremy. It's been a busy couple of weeks for yourself. The latest Wasp book, the Unstoppable Wasp, has hit the shelves. Before we kind of delve into that, let me ask you the question I always kind of start off with. How did you break into this wonderful field of comic books?
So I started off doing sort of small, self-published, creator-owned stuff. My first comic I ever published was a book called The Order of Dagonet, which is actually about a group of knights of England. The honorary type knights. The Elton Johns and the Ozzy Osbournes of the world, who are called to defend the kingdom against this magical threat. So. It's sort of picture Ozzy Osbourne fighting dragons. That's kind of what we were going for.
That I can see. Elton John, yeah. Maybe not so much.
Oh yeah, Elton John, Ian McKellen, get everybody in there.
Yeah. David Beckham.
Yeah, I think he might actually do all right. And then I started off that way, and then I think. Princeless was officially my second creator-owned book I started, and I did the first issue and kind of took it around to a bunch of conventions with me, and eventually Action Lab decided to pick it up. They set me up with my illustrating team over there, and we've been doing that for around 8 years now, I think. Yeah, and that got me a couple of other gigs at places like IDW, where I've written a lot of My Little Pony comics, and Dynamite, where I write Rainbow Brite currently. I got a couple of smaller gigs doing stuff at Marvel and places like that, and it's slowly expanded into a thing that I can actually make a living at.
Cool. Looking through your biography that I have borrowed from a certain website, I can see it has Vampirella as one of your books.
Yeah.
I'm going to admit that I own a couple of those Vampirella comics, and without going through my collection, it's Paul Cornell that's the writer. Is that right?
Paul Cornell was on there right before me. I came in right behind him and picked up I think at issue 7 is where I started, and then I wrote the tail end of that series.
Cool.
And it's pretty unique in my the group of comics I write, but it was an opportunity that came to me, and I was like, give me a chance to do some stuff I don't usually do, and flex some muscles I don't usually flex in writing. So it's pretty incredibly violent and tons of fun.
The look of that book is dramatically different from the Vampy books that have gone in the past. Did you find it? Had you read Vampy before in her many other iterations? And
I've read her here or there. I'd be lying if I said I was sort of a frequent reader or a purist there. But I'd read stuff that sort of intersected with creators I was interested in, I went through a lot of that, a lot more than I had read previously when I was offered the job, and tried to come up with sort of what my version of that character is, because I think there's a lot of think a lot of people boil it down to a very simplistic view of what Vampirella is, and Vampirella is anything but simple. I think once you get into it.
Yeah, red bathing suit, drinks blood, thigh high boots, and that's it, right? No.
Yeah.
I'm jesting, of course. Before all the Vampy fans absolutely go nuts and tell me I'm so wrong. It's fine. I get it. I know I'm wrong. It's fine. I was going for the joke. Okay, so Vampirella, My Little Pony, Rainbow Brite. That's that's quite a. I don't want to say dysfunctional, but it's quite a disparate sort of mix of books. What is it that kind of attracted you to stuff like My Little Pony and Rainbow Brite?
My Little Pony was an easy one because at that point I had a 2-year-old daughter, and I was working at night and staying home with her during the day. So I leaned pretty heavily on stuff that she would actually watch on TV, so that I could eke out a nap here and there, or at least sit down. So we made our way through a lot of TV shows that I absolutely despised, like Dora the Explorer, which has these sort of repetitive methods of talking about things.
Yeah, we have Dora over here also.
Yeah, yeah, that show slowly drove me insane. So there's a lot of me like looking for other stuff that I actually like could stand. And at one point, she was sort of drawn to My Little Pony, so we tried that out. And I was excited to discover that the current iteration is funny and well written and a lot different from what it was when I was a kid. And so like that was a thing that I could actually stand and enjoy when I was sitting around with her. So I got into that, and then I happened to meet Tony Fleece, who was working on the book, illustrating at that point, and he had read Princess. He was like, "Yeah, you should try out writing My Little Pony. I think it'd be great." And he introduced me to his editor, and I guess the rest is history. There, I've never done 39 of My Little Pony comics.
Oh, that's crazy. That is crazy. It's funny because My Little Pony, you automatically think is a kid's thing, but I know plenty of adults who buy the book.
Oh yeah.
I wonder what the attraction is to across the different sort of age groups for a book like My Little Pony. I'll admit right now, I'll put my hands up, and I have never picked up a My Little Pony book ever. So you will have to educate me on this.
I think it's it doesn't hurt that it's funny, and it doesn't hurt that the show set up sort of a history of good storytelling that we I think picked up in the comics as well. But I think there's some people that are attracted to the I don't know if it's purity or simplicity of the message and the lessons of it, and the fact that there's for a cartoon that is for children. There's a pretty well-rounded cast of characters, and I think it's easy for everybody to find a character that they relate to, regardless of the fact that they're small pastel-colored horses.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. The fact that I'd probably say genuine elements to it. That it is what it is. It's not kind of like, do you remember the old He-Man cartoons?
Mm-hmm.
Like the first, like He-Man and the Master of the Universe. You go through the whole big fight thing, and at the end it was like, "So, Orko, tell me what we have learned today." And you're like, "Oh, really? Come on! I don't care what we've learned. Just smash Skeletor some more." But so I think with franchises like My Little Pony, there is I think there's a genuine element to it. I think there's genuine affection for the characters because a lot of adults will gravitate towards books that they kind of remember for their kids. Like, hey, I remember this when I was, and so on and so forth. So did My Little Pony lead to Rainbow Brite? And if
I think
that's the case, when you're going to do Care Bears?
weirdly, My Little Pony actually led to Vampirella, and Vampirella led to Rainbow Brite.
What? Wait. This is like 7 degrees of separation from somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure how directly My Little Pony had anything to do with Vampirella, so much as I got hooked up with some of the editorial team over there at Dynamite, and I just let them know I was looking to do some stuff, and they had the opening coming up on Vampirella, and asked if that was a thing I'd be interested in. And I said, yeah, I'd love to try that out. And at that point, they had pretty well predetermined what the end of that arc was going to be as far as the number of issues. So I ended up writing, I think it's 4 and some change on issues. And I really got along with my editor over there, Kevin, who's does a variety of books over at Dynamite, and he let me know that they had Rainbow Brite coming up, that they'd set up this partnership with them and Hallmark, who owns Rainbow Brite. They were looking to do a series there, and he thought we would be a good match, and we kept going from there. So yeah, oddly, it's true that I got the Rainbow Brite job by writing Vampirella.
I can just imagine the pitch right now. So tell me about your last work. Well, funnily enough, it was about there's some sort of crazy that can see the two and go, oh yeah. But I have to admit, I think Dynamite are currently my second favorite publisher. I buy a host of their stuff, as well as
I've been trying to talk them into doing the Vampirella Rainbow Brite crossover, but they seem a little anxious about that.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I don't know. I'm sure they'd get along.
I think didn't I read last week that there's going to be, what is it, a Vampirella and Red Sonja meets Betty and Veronica?
I have heard that.
I have read that. So imagine Red Sonja as a cheerleader. She'd probably play football more than be a cheerleader.
Yeah, I think she'd be more likely to join the football team.
Definitely.
Vampy could go either way.
Sorry?
I said Vampy could go either way.
Yeah, cool. I just like the way they mess around and do stuff like that, because I think it gives it like a pulp feel, and I think, well, you know what, it's a short term thing. It's not real. Like, oh my god, they've changed everything about a character and all that sort of stuff. So, I think with Dynamite they've got the flexibility to do so much with characters, whereas some of the mainstream big two books don't, because the characters are so media icons. Mm-hmm. It was a fact back in the 80s that Wonder Woman was such a loss leader as a comic book, but they had to keep publishing it because they made tons of money on all the merchandise. So, it's kind of scary when you think that if it wasn't for lunchboxes and whatnot, we might not have had a Wonder Woman movie. So there you go.
Yeah, I think that's pretty wild. I mean, I think the same was when you think about that, and the fact that that original Lee and Kirby run of X-Men was canceled. Like, there wasn't an X-Men book for a while.
Yeah,
it wasn't popular enough for them to keep doing it. That's wild.
It's bonkers. I think.
I think
one point,
trades and digests and stuff like that, we've adapted to things like that a little bit. Having it where people can get it in other types of venues and stores and things like that. But yeah.
So that leads to an interesting question. And how do you feel about the comic industry as a whole then, with the fact that it was reported, rumored, whatever, that DC are looking to cut down some of their output? Marvel are putting out like books after books after books, and that's not even counting all the variants that kick about nowadays. Is the marketplace becoming a little bit too saturated? Are trades the way to go? Should we go digital?
I mean, I think there's an argument for all of those. I'm personally a person that likes to have books in my hand. The So I'm not a huge fan of reading stuff digitally, even though I'm glad it is available digitally for people who prefer it that way or can't get it another way, don't have a store near them. I think I like the current model of doing single issues and trades. I think there's still probably a little too much weight put on single issue sales when people consider how a book is doing or how a book performs, especially when often companies don't put out a trade for 6 months or a year after a book after the issues come out, because unfortunately that's been the case that we've seen a lot of books get canceled before there's even a trade available. And there's things like Mockingbird were incredibly they're incredibly popular in trade, but the book was already gone by the time the trades came out.
I absolutely love that book. I love that book. I went ballistic when that got cancelled, and then Spider-Woman got kind of half inched out as well. I was like, are you kidding me? You've got two really good, strong books there that are like different art styles, different messages. And I was like, and you've just cancelled them for the sake of what? Another Spider-Man book? Really?
Yeah, I think obviously I'm a Mockingbird fan. For better or for worse, that book got canceled, and I get to kind of steal her to be a part of the crew in Unstoppable Wasp, which has been nice to get to do stuff with her. But yeah, I think she's definitely a character who can carry her own book and should have her own book. And I think I might be biased because obviously Unstoppable Wasp has had 2 series. There's the first 8 issues that it got canceled after 8, but it did so much better in trade and sold so much more that that's how it ended up getting brought back for a second series. It's rare that a book gets canceled and then comes back.
Really? Have you not seen how many volumes of Captain Marvel there are right now?
Oh, that's a slightly different. There's a difference between canceling and renumbering.
All right. Okay, I will give you that, but still. All right. So let's get to the lady of the hour, as it were. So Unstoppable Wasp.
Yes.
How did you get involved in this book?
So I had done a couple of stories for Marvel, mostly short stories and sort of tie-in books for events. I'd done something for Secret Wars and something for Civil War 2, and had done a couple of other shorts or one-shots, things like that, and been really doing my best to annoy Tom Brevoort about getting some more stuff going over there. And they'd introduced Nadia for Free Comic Book Day, and she was part of that story, and she was in Avengers. And I'd known Mark Waid sort of on and off, and they were looking to do a book with Nadia, and between Mark and Tom, they thought I would be a good fit for it, and they approached me about pitching something for the story. And for the most part, what is in that first volume of Unstoppable Wasp is what I pitched. From the beginning, her putting together her own kind of lab and doing superhero science stuff with a big emphasis on the science side of things. So that sort of became the first thing, and this is the first ongoing series I got a chance to do at Marvel, and I think it's something I'm locked into now. She's my baby.
Bless. Okay, so mental illness has been a focus for this volume. Was that something that you wanted to kind of cover off from the inception, or is this something that was kind of considered when the book got sort of restarted, renumbered, whatever you want to call it?
It was something that my editor on that, Alana, and I had talked about from the beginning of the first volume, is the sort of question of Nadia's mental health and dealing with mental health stuff. because obviously her father Hank Pym has had sort of a history of mental illness, and was discussed that bipolar disorder was what he had in the Avengers AI series a few years back, and that is something that is frequently passed on genetically. People with family who have bipolar disorder have a much higher percentage chance of having it themselves. So we had talked about it, and we didn't feel like it was a good thing to jump right into with her story. We definitely didn't want her to be defined by her mental health issues. I don't think anybody in the real world wants to be defined by their mental health issues. So we wanted to take some time to really establish who Nadia was, and with an eye towards possibly doing that as a story in the future. Obviously, it didn't happen in the first volume because it got canceled at 8 issues. But then when they talked about bringing it back, one of the things that both Alana and Tom kind of pushed me on that when we started it was there's no guarantee of books lasting any length. You know that better than anybody. If there's a story you want to tell, this is the time to tell it. And that was I think when we settled on wanting to do that, I wanted to introduce a lot of superhero elements into the story, play with that, but also to touch on this in a very real world kind of way, while still having the stuff that makes it a fun superhero book to begin with.
Okay. So casting my mind back a little bit, with Nadia's I guess first appearance, I think Silk from the Spider-Man world also had a very kind of traumatic origin piece. She'd been kept locked away in a similar kind, well, maybe not as an assassin school, but kept away to protect her from the was it the Morlock that was chasing her down, the spider vampire dude. Why? How can I say this then? So when someone has a great idea for kind of like a story nugget, whereas so Nadia's been kept away in a red room somewhere, why does it seem, this is more about comic book industry question, I guess, why does it always seem that then similar things happen to other characters? Do you know what I'm getting at? Do you know what so I'll give you an example. This week's Fantastic Four features Doctor Doom trying to siphon off the power cosmic. In the same week, you've got Superior Spider-Man trying to do exactly the same thing to Terrax. It's like, it's a good idea, but why is it getting overused? Do you feel that, how can you, I guess, separate the fact that Nadia's had her origin and then characters like Silk have something that's similar, kinda? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. I think it's tough because I think in both cases, Nadia and Silk's origin is sort of, they were a revelation, that people found out about long after it happened. In Nadia's, obviously some of the inspiration for that character being created and coming forward was to have a younger Wasp, was a scientist who more closely resembled the character that we were seeing in the movies, but fit the comic book canon in a way that that the character of Hope Pym can't.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I get that. That's cool.
Yeah, because obviously Hope Pym is about the age that Hank is in the comics, and Hank is about the age that I feel like there's barely anybody that's the age that Michael Douglas is in.
The granddaddy of Hollywood even.
Yeah, I mean, it's so frequent that superheroes stay around that 20s, 30s, 40s range. Like it's very rare that anybody go past that. So, I think there's an element of similarity there. Obviously, Nadia also shares a lot in common origin-wise with Black Widow. And I think introducing characters, I think it's difficult to introduce characters that are going to hold their own book or have a lot of interest as babies. So, you gotta have a reason for them to have not been around up to that point. So, locked in a bunker, I think is one for which there is a precedent in the Marvel universe already.
All right. May I ask I'm going to ask a question and shout if it goes kind of out of bounds. Why did you want to cover mental health in a comic book, and why particularly bipolar?
So, I mean, representation of different types of people has always been important to me in comics. My own creator-owned series, Princess, is driven very largely by that, as is the sort of spin-off to that, Raven the Pirate Princess. They deal pretty heavily with representation of people of color and people of different sorts of all different sorts of people. And I think with dealing with the Wasp, I feel like there's an opportunity to take a piece of life that a lot of people frequently deal with on a day-to-day basis, be it bipolar disorder or other mental illness, and reinforce this true thing that is often sort of not reflected in comic books, that like real and good and complex people deal with mental illness, and having a mental illness doesn't make somebody a villain. And I think not as much in the last few years, but frequently throughout comics, that is the reason or the excuse or the origin of a lot of villains, is that they have a mental illness and therefore they are a bad guy. I think that's very much reflective of the time which comics were born and a lot of those characters were created. And I think with Nadia, I felt like there was an opportunity to have a character who reflected our feelings toward mental illness, in the time that she was created, as opposed to in the time that many of those other characters were created and continued to be around, even if we're well aware that like Two-Face is not an accurate representation of multiple personality disorder.
No, agreed. At this stage, does Nadia know that she's suffering from bipolar? Or maybe suffering's the right word. If she's seeing symptoms of bipolar. There you go. It's probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah. I think Janet is the first person to, I think, say it out loud in the comic, in issue 4 of the current series. Nadia, I think, it goes into sort of the manic part of bipolar disorder first, and has to go through that, not really quite understanding what's going on, as so many people do the first time that they experience a manic attack like that. And by the time that she's gone through all this and is in sort of the depressive stage, where she's talking to Priya in issue 5, it's clear that she has an idea of what's happening and that she is struggling with what to do about it.
Okay. Did you take on any advice regarding bipolar and its kind of symptoms, and how people who have bipolar express themselves and so on, to give it that realistic element?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had people in my life, friends and relatives who have dealt with various mental illness, but with bipolar specifically. And I don't consider myself any sort of expert on it. So I did my best to first start with a lot of sort of basic reading of what the symptoms are, what it's like, how it's described, what it feels like from perspective of people who have been there. And I moved up from there to sort of talking to, in my issues, there's a special thanks for people who have consulted on the book. And I spoke with both a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist who deals with people with a variety of different types of disorders, but has dealt with folks with bipolar disorder, and another friend of mine who is a professor of psychology, who could give me sort of good insight on what it should look like, on what sort of language and ideas I wanted to make sure were in there and which ones to avoid. And I also made sure to bring it to some of my friends who do deal either themselves with bipolar disorder or with family and friends, and our caretakers in one form or another for folks with bipolar disorder, because I wanted to make sure that we accurately reflected both what it is like from the perspective of Nadia, somebody who is dealing with the disorder, and for those around her who are seeing their friend deal with this for the first time.
Okay. So you kind of mentioned Hank. Hank has probably been. Is it fair to say that he's been kicked around by the Marvel Universe more than once? Is that a fair assessment to make?
Yeah, I mean, Hank certainly had a rough time of it. Ever since ever since his inception. I mean, he's not a guy who has it easy, and for anybody who's read the first appearance of Hank Pym, before he even becomes a superhero, his wife is kidnapped and disappeared by some sort of Eastern European government, and he loses her before he does any superheroing, and then has to deal with not just that, but mental illness, lots of different experiments going wrong. He's had a rough time of it over the years.
So I'd say in the past, kind of, you've touched on the mental illness, and of course, famously, Janet, the adult wasp, was in a bit of a abusive relationship with Hank for quite a period of time.
Yeah, I think in the current version of the Marvel Universe, it doesn't seem to have been openly abusive for most of their relationship. I think we really only see Hank hit Janet once or twice over the history of their story. It's a little bit different in different versions of the Marvel Universe. Obviously, the ultimate version of Hank Pym is a little less redeemable. Not a very nice guy.
It is hard. It is really hard sometimes to keep hold of. It's hard to keep track of the Marvel Universe that isn't DC one, which I find ironic considering DC had to do crisis after crisis after crisis, just to try and get the stall in order. But right now, I think Marvel's like massively convoluted.
Yeah, I mean it certainly can be, especially in some corners of the universe. It's I feel like it's one of those things that I at least try to keep it where you can read it and understand it when you're looking at it, but the further you want to dive, the more stuff there is there to uncover, and the more complicated it gets.
I kind of sometimes liken it to watching classic Star Trek. You just put it on, watch the show, and don't worry that the star dates don't make any sense whatsoever. It's just watch it. It's Star Trek. Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. So the gang that's in Unstoppable Wasp, they're pretty much Nadia's support network. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, they're definitely her support network. A lot of them are also her lab mates. We have Girl, the Genius in Action Research Lab, which there's Nadia and 4 other girls that are part of that, as well as some of their relatives, and then Janet, who is her sort of stepmom of sorts. The original Wasp, and then Mockingbird, who is handles the science side of the advising, and then we have a couple of other folks like Jarvis, who are around for emotional support, things like that.
So Jarvis is currently making a bit of appearance in the Amazing Spider-Man books with his support network for people who care about heroes. Have you seen that?
I'm a little behind on Spider-Man, but I am aware of it.
All right, cool. So does that kind of tie into something that Naja's going through then, or because theoretically, someone who cares about Naja could be one of the people getting support from Jarvis, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's not something we've tied together directly, but I think Jarvis is certainly someone with a lot of experience of caring for and dealing with people who have a variety of different issues between superhero issues and personality issues and mental disorders and things like that. Having been the Avengers butler for so long, I mean, you can only clean up after Clint Barton so long before you start having your own PTSD.
That's why they kicked him to California. Okay, so what I like, I guess, about the current storyline or the B plot about them regarding mental illness and mental health is that it doesn't seem to be going away. There's no magic cure in play. That's all well and good whilst you're on the book. So you mentioned that Naja is your baby. What the powers that be? What if they decide, well, you know what? Mockingbird was really good, but then we don't like, I don't know, the feminist agenda. I'm not saying there was one. I'm not saying there is one or anything. I think Chelsea Cain was a fantastic writer. I love Mockingbird. Yeah. Spider-Woman got domesticized, and Dennis Hopeless, who was writing the hell out of that book brilliantly, doof, that's gone. Do you worry there comes a point when Wasp becomes as relatable to fans and readers that it also becomes less product for Marvel, if you know what I mean? That's a really long question. I'm really sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I think
because what I mean, I'd hate for you've put all this work into this storyline, this long running plot. It's been dangled and been picked at and touched on, and now that it's out in the open, I would absolutely hate for the big red button to be hit and everything. Oh, she's just another superhero again. I think that absolutely would destroy all the fans of Naja, all the people who realise that mental health is an issue, because to a lot of people, this may be their only way into that sort of conversation or that awareness.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly, obviously think I generally think it's a mistake for anything that I've written or has been worked on to be erased, obviously. But I think there's an investment in it within Marvel editorial and with other folks that I've worked with. I mean, for instance, Nadia is appearing in Champions right now, which Jim Zub is writing, and we've had a lot of discussion back and forth about Nadia's mental state and how we should reflect that in Champions as well. And we do a lot of talking about what we should carry over from book to book and what we want to leave specific to one book or another. I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. I think it would certainly not be the best decision, but it's part of the nature of long running comics.
Yeah.
The rate of teens change, people change, but hopefully it's something that's there to stay, because I mean, bipolar disorder is not a cold. It's not something that you can cure and just is gone.
Yeah. I like hearing the fact that you and Jim Zubber are actually taking time out to talk to each other. I spoke to Chuck Dixon a while back, and we talked about how Bane gets used a lot. And I said, does anybody sort of ring you up and say, oh, I want to do this with Bane. Do you think that would work for the character? Because, Chuck was one of the co-creators of the character. And he's like, no, not at all. They're just like, Bane's in the book and that's it. It's done and done. So the fact that you guys are getting together to talk about making Nadja more realistic in the various appearances, I think that's only got to be a good thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've known Jim for a while now. I think I think if you pick up the first volume of Princeless, he actually wrote a little short story that's in the back there where his creator-owned book Skull Kickers sort of crosses over with mine. It's only like a short 2 or 3 page thing, but Jim is a fantastic guy and always has great ideas. And I think at the point that he took over Champions was right about the same time that Wasp was starting back up. So I from the beginning was like, I'm going to make sure I talk with Jim and keep this consistent. But Jim, to his credit, has done a great job of keeping contact with not just me, but all the other people who are writing, books with those characters in it, be it, Greg Pak and Amadeus Cho or Eve Ewing and Ironheart or Saladin Ahmed now and Ms. Marvel. Jim keeps everybody sort of abreast of what's going on and makes sure that he takes into consideration what's happening in their books as far as whether or not things make sense to go forward with in Champions.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's a great guy and a great writer, and I think it's sort of the ideal situation is that we'll talk back and forth and discuss what's going on and make sure that everything makes sense and the character is noticeably the same character between books.
It's good because the other thing is, of course, Batgirl. She went through the whole Oracle thing. DC then decided, hey, you know what? Let's just make a Batgirl again. And you'll have heard the amount of noise, and justifiably so, because Oracle as a character by herself was equally, if not more, important to the DC universe than Batgirl was.
Absolutely.
So you take away that kind of, and you're right, nobody wants to be defined by their physical or their mental health. But you can see that as soon as she's back in the kit, Barbara Gordon loses absolutely quite a lot of the things that made her interesting to start with, at least as Oracle. Now she's just another Bat. So,
I think I think there you can see there've been a ton of different Batgirls over the years. I love Barbara Gordon, but I wouldn't even say she's my favorite Batgirl. But she is.
Then you piqued my interest. Who's your favorite Batgirl?
I love Cascade. She's fantastic. I love her early appearances, especially when she didn't really talk at all. It was really cool stuff going on with that character, and I'm happy every time she gets a resurgence because I like all the Batgirls, but she I think is my favorite.
See, nobody says Steph Brown. I must be the only Steph Brown Batgirl fan in the world.
I mean, I like Steph, but I don't like her as much as I like Cass. I feel like Cass is she's very unique. I don't feel like there's any other character quite like her.
So basically, you're saying Steph Brown's not your favorite Robin either, right? That's fine. Don't worry. I'm not going to put a gun in your head. It's fine.
Tough. She might be. It's between her and Tim. So.
Shut up! Really? No way. Nobody. I'm the only person I know that says Steph Brown's the best Robin. It's like a thing. Never mind.
I like Steph and Tim. I think Steph I like better as Batgirl, just like I like Dick better as Nightwing. But I think Tim is a solid Robin.
Okay, so what's next for you? Are you on Unstoppable Wasp for the foreseeable future? Is it going to be Unstoppable Jeremy?
Yeah, I've written through issue 10 so far. Weirdly, we don't have an issue coming out in March. There was a delay that kind of pushed that back, but then we have 2 coming out in May. So we'll get 1 in April and 2 in May.
We call that a case of the doomsday clocks. That's what we call it round here.
Well,
you can't say anything because you might want to gig at DC down the line. That's fine.
yeah, that's no, I'm not gonna say anything.
Go on. You know you want to. Go on.
I can't. I can't imagine the stress that must be involved in getting that book out and dealing with everything around trying to work with all of the different characters and different bits that are in that book and making them work together.
You say that, but other event books like Hero and Crisis seem to ship on time. So
yeah,
and
that's it's a tough one.
It's are you reading Doomsday? What have you read it?
I can't say that I am right now. I'm down to pretty few comics that I'm reading on a regular basis, just because I spend so much time writing them now.
Okay. So what's on your pull list? What?
Let's see.
Not Unstoppable Wasp, because you know what's happening in the next issue, so you won't read that, right? So
yeah, I'm on top of that one. I obviously read Champions and Ms. Marvel. I read both Squirrel Girl and Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur with my daughter. Those are her absolute favorites. I keep The Wicked and the Divine and Saga to myself. I don't let my 7-year-old read those.
Okay.
Those are both great books. I'm a fan of basically anything that Matt Fraction or Kelly Sue DeConnick put out. I love all of their stuff. I'm trying to think what else I'm on top of still. I'm way behind on a lot of things. Cool. I read Domino on a regular basis. I love.
Who thought Gail Simone had such a great sense of humor?
Oh, I do. Obviously,
I don't know the girl, but it's like after Batgirl and Birds of Prey being like super serious, and then Domino comes along, I was like, whoa, this is great. I absolutely loved it. The same with Domino and Shang-Chi? That's it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it right. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely fun. Totally get that. As for Moon Girl, I actually interviewed the artist. There you go. Recently. So he's going to be on an OTP soon. So it might even be out by the time this one airs. So, so I know that loads of people love that book. So you have good taste, my friend.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I try to keep up with as much of the stuff as I can. I think I have a tendency to read more Marvel stuff, partially because that's always what I grew up with, but also because sort of a demand of the job now.
Yeah, I suppose it's hard to work in the Marvel universe if you're not sort of like spending time in it. So it's kind of
It's nice to know what characters I can and can't use before I try to write them into a script too.
Yeah, just avoid the Wrecking Crew because they've been like the bad guys in like so many books recently. I've definitely had the experience of wanting to write a character in a story and discovering that they're dead. Excuse me. All right, excellent. Okay, so that's it for this episode. 1 second. Clear my throat. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for taking time out. I really appreciate it. Unstoppable Wasp, which I can't seem to say in one go, is an absolute fantastic read. You've got such a great character going on there.
Thank you.
And you deserve loads of plaudits for bringing up a difficult subject to a lot of people and making it relatable in a way that people will get something out of that, and hopefully demystify some of the prejudice against people with mental health. So you know, round of applause for your attempts. I really think you're doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Cool. You are more than welcome. All right, guys, that's it from Jeremy in his coffee shop. We didn't get to ask him, was it a cappuccino that you had or was it a latte?
It's a mocha latte.
Oh, there you go. And stay tuned to the UCPN for all your favorite shows, including other episodes of the Outside the Panels, the Definitive Crusade, and of course, the No Prize podcast. All right, this is the Machine Hugh saying, see ya.
Visit undercovercapes.com for the latest and greatest podcasts via the Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Also visit our parent company website, comiccrusaders.com, all about comic pop culture.